there is use for AI, but you need to know the general shape of what it is you're trying to get to, right? And there's a skill in that too. Basically, meaning you need to know how to do the job already. The AI cannot make it better. It can perhaps introduce some inefficiency, but it can't give you a new skill, right? So you need to know how it can look so you can check it along the way and go, okay, this is right, this is right. We see this all the time. And I would suggest audience to think of it that way too. I wouldn't say write a book for me because that's not something I've done. I wouldn't be able to tell. It sure looks right. But if I know specifically what that process looks like and I see along the way that there's some issues, then I'd say, okay, no, this isn't. Then it can be affected. But if it's a whole new skill, don't know.
Well, that kind of leads into our next conversation, Cliff, which is the U.S. Department of Labor's release of our AI literacy framework to advance the AI skill development efforts across the country. I had to read the actual title because I wanted to make sure we were getting right what this framework was supposed to do. My head's about to explode with the amount of AI frameworks I'm seeing come out in the market.
I know, right?
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today on February 26, 2026. Well, that's always nice to be 2026 on 26, but it's a busy month and there's a lot going on. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group. We are a research and advisory firm, worked with us previously. And joining me today is my co-host, and the conversation is Cliff Stevenson, our Director of Research and Principal Analyst at Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, welcome to the conversation today. It's kind of rainy and yucky here in North Carolina. I think you're getting a little bit better weather finally in Florida, but we're still filling for all of our friends up north who have lots of snow this week. It's not a ridiculously hectic news week, but there's a lot still going on, right? And AI is in everything, it seems, right?
Wow, spoiler alert.
I know.
Yeah, not a ton. What's pretty interesting is we just did an analysis for an upcoming webinar, we'll be talking about that in a second, of everything we talked about in 2025. And it was pretty interesting to see the sort of flow of topics. It makes sense sometimes, right, of when there's going to be more M&A activity, when there's going to be more product activity. And I'd say at this time, there's more sort of outcomes. There's a lot of stories around the industry rather than sort of direct, big earth-shattering announcements. A lot of things that are sort of falling out from earlier conversations. But yes, a lot around AI, and we're starting to see some of the legal cases that are coming out that we knew were going to happen. So I'm pretty interested to talk about that sort of stuff.
Legal
with the caveat that we are not.
I know. And believe me, Cliff and I, this is the end of a very long week, just FYI, everybody. So as you're listening to us, we're going to be a little all over the place because we've done count them three. If anybody who knows us knows what a deep dive is in our world, we do deep dives into our data for our customers who basically want us to go in and say all the things we can tell them about themselves, about their products, about what customers are saying about them. We've done 3 of them this week, and we love our customers and we love our data, and we could spend hours crunching it, but 3 is a lot. We made the decision that next year we're going to try and space these out a little bit more. But anyways, needless to say, it has been a very, very busy week. So Cliff and I, our brain is a bit mush. But what you were talking about, what we're doing the analysis for, is we're actually on the 5th of March. Yeah, March 5th, we are going to be doing our very first State of the Industry presentation, conversation, whatever you want to call it, for our subscription owners. So every year we now are going to do 2 of these where we will basically be pulling together all the things we've been talking about for the last 6 months to a year and giving an update and overview to all of our subscription members about sort of what's happening in the market, patterns we've seen, how those markets are being analyzed. And that's what you were doing that analysis for, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what we're seeing. Not just, it won't be the same as doing the key findings that you've seen from the report. This will be sort of, yes, looking at where we are and where we're going. And it really, I think the timing of it is really great too. And like I said, it'll be for the subscription holders because it also lets us figure out how we want to change or emphasize certain areas of our survey going into survey year. Last year, for instance, was our highest number of respondents ever. And I think a lot of that is because regardless of the size of this survey and the report that comes out of it, we always try and take the pulse, get the state of the industry so that it can be relevant. And that seems to resonate because last year we had over 10,000 participants, over 4,600 different organizations that took it. And we love to see that number go even higher. So please, if you're listening to it, look for it. If you haven't already seen it, you should start seeing it on April 15th if you're working with one of our distributors. But if not, if you have not seen an announcement for whatever reason by April 30th, it goes out on April 29th, just write to us, info at Sapient Insights, and we will make sure you get a copy because your voice will be heard. As Stacey was saying, we've been doing these deep dives, and a lot of that is going through individual comments that are written in. Your voice gets heard at the highest levels and can affect product development. It can affect how the language that's used for the marketing. It can even affect the brand and the design because, vendor satisfaction is important too. So, this is really important. And I always say we couldn't do it without you. And so if you're hearing us, and I know that more and more of you listening to us, thank you. Please also take the survey because that'll be useful. And
if you're seeing us on screen, we apologize because we look tired and very pasty. We have not been outside this week at all. So
you look wonderful.
On our YouTube channel, which Cliff always mentions because he's the one who puts it up there and makes sure it gets there. We apologize. It's just been a long week. All right, Cliff, let's get moving on this.
I'll just throw out one other one too.
Right?
I'll throw out a couple other things too. If for some reason you want to hear more of us, see more of us, both of us have done webinars recently that you can watch on demand. I did one that you can find through either Insperity or HR Dive. You can just search for that with, it's called Proven Strategies to Scale HR and Align with Business Growth, with the idea being that there are different ways and different actions you need to take based on our data, regardless of the size of company you're at, even if you're, between 5 and 100 or 100 to 250. There are different strategies, but everyone would benefit from being more strategic in your HR movements. And we talk about the specifics of that. Practitioner focused, I'd say. And Stacey, you also had one, is that right?
Yeah. So I did a great conversation, just a quick half hour with Nancy Zellner over at Oracle. She's had some of their their HCM strategy. What we talked about was where AI was at, but we talked about it on a global front, which usually we talk a lot about AI. There's a lot of who's adopting, what are they adopting, how are they adopting. We talked about what we'd seen globally and how that was shifting some of the global conversation. So we had a lot of conversations about what was difference between AI and being embedded in HR in the US versus in EMEA versus the Asia Pacific market. We talked about some of the big government incentives that are going out for doing AI investment. We're going to get into some of that today as well, some of the frameworks that some of the governments have been putting out. Just some things I think that don't get covered a lot because they're more political and regional and focused on sort of the compliance side of this conversation. But it was a good conversation. So you'll be able to see that by the time I think this is launched. If you go to the Oracle website and look up Oracle AI conversation with Stacey Harris, I think is probably the easiest way to do it. And if not, we'll find a link to it and post it to you as soon as we can. But it was a good conversation. Nancy and I always have fun when we're talking. So I promise you'll have a couple laughs when you listen to it. Part of this, Cliff, there's so much going on about, I think one of the things that I was impressed with when you looked at your numbers that you looked at was the number of mergers and acquisitions. And there's a lot of that going on.
Excellent segue, Stacey.
I was going there. My brain's not completely, all the cells have not been used up. But we've got a lot of acquisitions right now.
Yeah, including some international stuff for our international listeners. SD Workx, which is probably one of the leading HR payroll companies out there in Europe, has acquired Pay and RH Solutions. That's one company, by the way. I know that the and is just part of the name. Think of it as like, I don't know, B&H or something like that. So they've acquired Pay and RH Solutions, which are out of Po. You're going to hear me pronouncing some French here, and I apologize to any of the French listeners. But Pay and RH are payroll for SMEs and lower mid-market, right? So that expands SD Workx' reach in France and in Western Europe for smaller sized companies than they might have reached before. They are, definitely focused on that. And then they've also made an investment, SD Workx, in Yeep, which is payroll tech. So that is, again, they will not be acquiring them, but they are going to be a minority shareholder at this point. So they also do payroll outsourcing. So it's payroll tech and services through Yeep. So pretty interesting.
Which is a big global conversation right now, right? We're just talking to one of our clients right now who's getting ready to open up small payroll amounts, so just a couple, like 5 or 6 employees for the moment in the UK, but they're going to be looking at Italy. They're going to be looking at France. If you've got even got a larger amount, right? Like you hire people who know stuff on the ground who are there, right? Especially if you're in the United States, but if you're in any other country as well, or you really think about outsourcing at this point and figuring out how you can do that in a way that is both safe and legal. And so I'm not surprised that that's where SD Workx is putting some investment, right?
Yeah. And I also want to point out that if you're searching for something like this, Pay and RH Solutions, that's PAIE. I realize there's a lot of payroll companies that use the American word pay, but that's not what they're going for here. Then this one is pretty interesting because this continues a conversation we definitely started last year, which is the expansion of what we would consider HR tech. And that is that Canva has acquired MangoAI and Cavalry. So on its surface, I would say 3 years ago, if this story had kind of come across our desk, as it were, I would have said, okay, that's of no interest. But it becomes more and more evident that you guys are all using this type of stuff. We did a question on last year's survey of which particular AI-enabled solutions are you using and which do you find to have the highest user experience and vendor satisfaction ratings. And Canva is right at the top. Not number one, but they're being compared to all sorts of things. I think Perplexity had higher scores, but they're more of a search engine, AI-enabled search. But Canva is well aware of this, and they are trying to expand their platform to be more useful to HR practitioners and into that enterprise use. So with that, MangoAI, which does a lot of the marketing algorithms, makes perfect sense, right? Because they want to be able to get marketing-focused content out. And that doesn't just mean marketing of products, right? Anyone that works in a business realizes you have things like recruitment marketing, internal marketing, and communications, and you still want it to look in as professional manner as possible, probably without paying the amount of money needed for instance, an Adobe license, right? So, that works alongside Affinity. If you know that's sort of completely free graphic design tools offered by Canva. So you have that. And then what's interesting too is Cavalry, which is based out of the UK, whereas MangoAI is US based, and they are a motion and animation software company. So you think, especially in the learning space, where there's long been sort of companies coming in and doing some more of this sort of animation work, being able again to do that with a suite of tools that your average HR practitioner would actually find useful without needing the 5 years of training on Adobe Animate. I don't mean to pick on Adobe. I'm just picking the number one product, right?
Well, but I do think that Adobe and Canva are like, I don't think 5 years ago, I don't think people would have thought that Canva was, other than in the graphics place, would have been a competitor to what Adobe was doing. They were building out this massive sort of tool for doing content creation and awareness. And I think Canva's starting to build into that space. And Adobe is a huge solution that's bought by the learning professionals, right? And now recruiting marketing uses it on a regular basis. Now we've got the same thing on Canva. So I think, Cliff, this is moving more and more into an HR, because when you think about our big role, it's communications on a lot of levels, right?
That is it. And we've been keeping an eye on this closely enough that I'm going to actually be out at Canva Create in mid-April, and I will report back. We're already talking to them about some conversations we'll have directly about where they're going with this and how this will affect the sort of solutions you're looking for at the enterprise and business and HR level.
Yeah, to give some example of this, in 2015, I always tell people, our data is a bit of, you can get some early indicators. In 2015, our data had this interesting help desk called ServiceNow that nobody knew about. Nobody said, what is that? It's not an HR system at all. I can remember a friend of mine who then ended up going over to work at ServiceNow said he used our survey. He's like, I saw this. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is really an HR job over here, because he took over some of the product area there. And then within 5 years now, they are synonymous with a lot of HR processes and a lot of HR tools. I think Canva might be another one that's going to head in that direction. AI is definitely pushing it there, but I would, if you are a long-term watcher of our survey, we do sometimes pick up on those early indicators. I'm just telling you, Canva might be something you want to watch.
Absolutely. So then we also have some money being raised. Speaking of, in that sort of investment space, Combo with a K. So for our Mortal Kombat friends out there, has raised $25 million in a Series A. So right there at the beginning, and what they are doing. I think it was last episode, right? We talked about Pantamath, right, Stacey, and told people to keep an eye on them. And Pantamath, if you're listening, we saw you talking about us too, or mentioning in the comments. So thank you for that. But yeah, so Combo is going to basically be an infrastructure layer, right? But working within specifically sort of the HR space. So getting all of the data and sitting in between where all that data is, and then making it useful to the actual teams and the people involved across the life cycle, right? It's not focused on one particular area. It's more about that sort of integration of data. Something that we've talked about a little bit before is some of these integration technologies, right? And new companies that are coming up, they're specifically trying to work within this sort of new level of AI, agentic models, data, and all of the different aspects that come from these giant cluster models. That's another sort of thing we've talked about. And then what do we do with it? Well, that's what they're hoping to solve, right?
Yeah, I think that the exact term I would like, the new funding will accelerate our ambitions to become the backbone of the workforce industry. We'll go deeper across talent acquisition, HR, payroll, and IT systems, scale our team across New York, US and Berlin, and keep investing in enterprise-grade reliability and security, and set the standard for agent-ready people data. Paragraph alone should tell you, if you are anywhere in the platform space, to one, be careful, and two, watch what's happening here, because we think this is, and again, I do think, you look at the most recent acquisitions by the big players. I mean, Workday's big acquisition of, I think it was Pipe Dream is what it was called, but it was just an API collector, right? With an MCP.
MCP.
Yeah. But this is the space right now. I was talking the other day with a couple of organizations, and the aggregation, the cleaning up of the data, the figuring it out. I know we've talked about it forever. I feel like a broken record half the time when I talk about it, but this is when it matters. AI doesn't work if your data is not clean. AI doesn't get to where it needs to be if you don't have your roads cleaned up for it to get there. This has always been the challenge with the program. Now we have a driver who can maybe go around some of the bumps, because that's what AI can do. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be better than it is, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of, well, actually, I'm not about to say speaking of things that aren't perfect, but that doesn't sound very nice. Something that maybe was delayed a little bit, but is out now, is the Workday Agent System of Record. We had actually mentioned that this was being developed, I think, last year, but is now in GA, is now generally available, meaning you could go and get it now. So a little bit later, but again, they may have been, I think that's where I was trying to head with the segue, is that they were taking the time to iron out any issues, making sure that it worked, because this is definitely an area where you want to have things perfect, because a small error can be it can cascade, right?
Can cascade, and an agent can not only cascade, but it can make it from a molehill into a mountain pretty quickly, right? If it's doing something, because it's doing it in a way that which is not compliant with from a legal perspective, right? So I think, I think the stat they've got in here is that human AI agents, in fact, 82% of organizations are expanding their use of AI agents. I'm not sure where they got that stat from, but it was in the press release. Our data shows that they are tripling it from the data that we had, which really is only at 4% from last year. So I think it'll probably be closer to, at least on the HR front, will probably be more like 30 or 40% adoption in agents. But it's going to be my estimate. We'll see if we get there for next year, because I think, again, you have to be very careful about what you're doing. But this, they start talking about an agent system of record. I was with my granddaughter, and we were at the Natural Museum. I remember that. And I think we were in California. So it would have been just last year. I think we did that in March, April timeframe. So it would almost, but not quite a year ago. Right. And it was one of the first things I think David Summers came out with in this sort of new space that they were talking about. So yeah, I mean, this has been coming down the pike for a while. It is definitely an area where I think you've seen ServiceNow jump into it, and a couple others come out with it. I think, this is one area where you definitely don't want to buy some off-the-shelf tool that doesn't have an understanding of your current logistics and your current security that's in place. This is a place where you definitely want to connect this to whatever security you're already building inside your infrastructure. So whether that's through Workday or anything else, you got to make sure it's connected to your security.
Yeah, well said. And we've got some people news. Bless you. Yep. And anyone out in the audience that sneezed, bless you too. There you go. And that's from Employ. They're the Employ Inc. is the ones that oversee Jazz HR, Lever, JobVite. And so they have had some leadership changes. Now, Jerry Zhao is now the CEO, and Patrick Jean, who goes by PJ, is now the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. Jerry Zhao is someone who's come up in just sort of the entrepreneurship space. A pretty interesting background. He created a company, a marketing company, Resi, that got picked up by Constant Contact, and has actually used Lever as a recruiting tool back then. And then has also worked at Clear Channel, but also at KPMG and Morgan Stanley. So a little more traditional, at least at the beginning. And Patrick Jean has worked at a number of different sort of very tech and engineering type roles, like Citrix, for instance, and OutSystems. But pretty interesting because Employ is one of those ones, we do talk a lot to them. They are always forthcoming and give us quite a bit of information. But I think maybe because of the number of solutions that are under their umbrella, that I feel like we kind of don't see them show up too much. It's sometimes almost hard to remember that they are under one umbrella.
It is. Right. And in a survey, right, people know them only by what their original names were. And I was trying to kind of sort of get a figure here because we knew Catherine Antonella, I think, and that's who we used to follow underneath this. And I haven't been able to sort of tell is this sort of changing her role, or is this kind of going over some of the other roles? So I do think that, part of what we're trying to figure out with Employ is that the vision for all of these solutions kind of tied together. I think that's the one thing oftentimes I have the question about it. I think individually these solutions work really well for their various audiences. Maybe there is no a need to sort of tie them together. But I think that's part of, I think when they were originally brought together was the idea of were there going to be some sort of a connectivity kind of, seems like right now they're kind of running them independently, right?
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me though if we started to see some changes in basically, funding or just basic structure. I think we talked 2 episodes ago about what does it mean? Does your sort of company vision matter? It's pretty philosophical, but it's part of what we get into. And I think here they specifically call out the mission when they were talking about what's going on here. And part of what they talk about is the scaling, right? And if you look at that sort of entrepreneurial mindset that they get from Jerry Zhao and the very tech sort of disruptive space that PJ comes from, then I think it's a signifier that they're looking to change and grow. I mean, every company is, but this might be a shot in the arm that they're looking for. But that's, again, speculation. Something that's not speculation, though, and I think is pretty interesting, is HR Tech. That is now that, and by that I mean the conference, right? The group. HR Tech, not the concept. So we all know there's HR Tech conference.
So HR Tech, HR Executive Magazine, which runs HR Technology Conference, which is run by the ARC organization, which is the enterprise organization that runs it. So let's make sure we get all the names correct on this one.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. The concept being, like, if you're someone who's in this space and you go to what would generally just shorten to HR Tech in Vegas, well, they're going to have something like that, but now in Abu Dhabi. So there's going to be some expansions there. So just like we are seeing expansions in interest and in these tools across Europe and Latin America and the Middle East and APAC, they are looking to meet those needs. So there will be an HR Tech Abu Dhabi in April and November throughout those months in 2026. In Qatar, there will be one in Doha on 28th of April. In Dubai.
Those are tables that they're starting out with, but they're looking to do the bigger event there eventually. So those are like smaller events that they'll be running to sort of get insight into what's happening, and then they're looking at doing these sort of as a full event.
That's right. I should point out that big conference will be in Abu Dhabi. That will be in 2027, I believe. Is that correct? Yes. So yeah, but those roundtables, as you mentioned, the smaller events, Dubai on the 30th of April, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia on the 4th of November, and then Abu Dhabi on the 9th of November. So.
It's worth noting, right? Like, so I'll be at the HR Tech Europe event, which will be in April here, that I'll be going to the week of April 20th. And I'll be there doing several sessions. But I think, Cliff, the thing that you and I talked about when we saw this is that not only is this important, we are seeing more interest in the Middle East. Middle East is doing more from an HR perspective in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of money flowing in that market. And you definitely have seen So Oracle has a real strong hold from a software solutions perspective in the Middle East. That was a lot of what Nancy and I were talking about, is some of their Middle East partners and companies. I think she just came back from Abu Dhabi in India as well. But we also see in this market that Workday just made an announcement that they're targeting that market as well, right? And so we do know that this is going to be a competitive landscape for the HR tech space for quite some time right now.
Exactly. And if this is something you're interested in, Ruth Dance, you can find it on LinkedIn, but of course I'll also put it in the notes and the comments for when this goes out. Same with in YouTube. And Ruth Dance will be able to give you all the information you need. Another bit of information that came out that was pretty interesting, and one that we look forward to every year. It comes from PayScale, and it's their compensation best practices report. They've been doing this a number of years, and I find these sort of reports that might seem a little niche, maybe at first glance, like, oh, okay, who's interested in compensation? Because I think that is kind of, in some ways, a very good indicator of what's going on, a good way to help discern the tea leaves of where we're going, right? And basically on where sort of pay is going. For instance, one that was pretty interesting that they found was that 61% of organizations now put that AI-related skills are part of existing roles, meaning that, if you had a job, they would now update that role and say that is now one of the skills needed for this job. But only 55% are not. So only 45% are adjusting compensation, but 55% are not adjusting compensation for the skills. So the majority, just slightly more than half, are saying, yeah, that's a skill you need to have now. Okay.
I'm not paying more for it.
I'm with you, girl.
When you said this, I was like, come on, guys, look, right? Like it's not, AI is not pick up and learn it, right? There's some skills that are required here and some work. I know I'm putting in a lot of hours. You're putting in a lot of hours. They're not paying for it makes me a little frustrated. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things we're going to be talking about a little later in the show is this whole there's been a lot of talk in the last 2 weeks about sort of, whoa, this is crazy. There's a revolution, an AI revolution. It seems like this happens every once in a while. It's like, okay, which is it? Is it changing fundamentally how the entire world works, or is it just something that you need to have as a skill and it's not worth paying extra for? I mean, it seems like you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I always love the comp. I always tell people payroll data and compensation data gives you the reality check on what's happening in the world. And if they aren't willing to pay extra for it, the question becomes, is it adding the value they need? So that's, now granted, I do know, and we know a lot of organizations, AI development, AI people who are doing AI development, they're getting multi-million-dollar offers to do the work that they're doing, right? There was one right now about someone being stolen, I think, for OpenAI, for Meta, right? And they're stealing each other's best talent right now to do the job. I get it, and I understand it, but I think there is some real skill in being able to use AI effectively, to have the judgment, to have the emotional intelligence needed to manage it effectively and manage how it works within the people environments. Just to call out to companies, you can't expect to get out of it what you want without paying something for it, right?
Yeah, I was going to save this comment for later, but this for all my fellow people who watch way too much YouTube. But there's a YouTuber, Legal Eagle, Devin, that had a nice summation from the story we're going to talk about, which is the Matt Shumer post. Spoiler, we're going to be talking about that. Where he said he has found in the legal profession that there is use for AI, but you need to know the general shape of what it is you're trying to get to, right? And there's a skill in that too. Basically, meaning you need to know how to do the job already. The AI cannot make it better. It can perhaps introduce some inefficiency, but it can't give you a new skill, right? So you need to know how it can look so you can check it along the way and go, okay, this is right, this is right. We see this all the time. And I would suggest audience to think of it that way too. Do you know? I wouldn't say write a book for me because that's not something I've done. I wouldn't be able to tell. It sure looks right. But if I know specifically what that process looks like and I see along the way that there's some issues, then I'd say, okay, no, this isn't. Then it can be affected. But if it's a whole new skill, don't know.
Well, that kind of leads into our next conversation, Cliff, which is the U.S. Department of Labor's release of our AI literacy framework to advance the AI skill development efforts across the country. I had to read the actual title because I wanted to make sure we were getting right what this framework was supposed to do. My head's about to explode with the amount of AI frameworks I'm seeing come out in the market.
I know, right? I think you made a comment on one of the stories like, isn't this the exact opposite of what AI is supposed to be doing? Is it supposed to be fluid and unstructured?
It's like leaving us so that we don't have to have frameworks across everything, that it can actually read it without us having to categorize. Yeah, that was my facetious way of saying, yeah, every human being and even AI will be doing what we all want to do, which is categorizing things, right?
Yeah. And I would say that this is basic, but I also believe it's meant to be. So, they're saying there's some foundational aspects of AI literacy. Understand AI principles, explore all uses, direct effectively. That's that shaping I was kind of talking about or demonstrating about. Evaluate the inputs, I think, and use AI responsibly. Now, that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and say those are bad ideas because we've been saying you should do the same on this very show. And I think having it written out makes sense. So,
and then tying some skill sets to it and what the outcomes would be and what that looks like. You do have to have that component to it. So I think it's great for us all to maybe be marching in somewhat the same direction that, yes, you should use it ethically. Do we have to say that? Yes, we do, because regulations matter. I'm sorry, friends. What I really like is this was reposted by Keith Sonderling. And those who don't know Keith, we know him somewhat, kind of tangentially, through the fact that he was the EEOC commissioner and went to many HR tech conferences. Madeline Loreno did several panels with him. And I think he really does have an affinity for the HR audience and a real wish to make sort of things better for workforces and HR together, right? And so he is now, his new role is the Deputy Secretary of Labor, and we've been following some of what he's been stating, and so this is definitely an area that he's kind of doubling down on, is this focus for the administration on AI, right?
Exactly. It's pretty interesting because they did also, and I think this is somewhat related, in that same 2-week period, the Department of Labor also launched an open data portal. So to give you better, I would say more useful access to labor data. Anyone that's ever pulled BLS statistics, for instance, or anything like that knows it just comes in this big, awkward, I don't even want to call it a spreadsheet because it's not in that format, right? You don't get it in Excel format. You get it in just almost like you can almost see that it's like a photocopied piece of paper, right? So now there are considerations that we might as well just be honest. It's tough to trust the data coming out of the United States departments right now. Stacey and I both are, big believers, obviously, in true data, and we can't really give recommendations. I will say that from what it seems like, there are been enough protections in place, enough sort of checks and balances that we're certainly not telling you, no, ignore this. And I do think it's a step in the right direction to make data more accessible, easier to use, easier to understand. We all want those sort of dashboards. Unasked for opinion, but I do believe that it can be useful and trustworthy up to a point. But something I wouldn't have also said 2 or 3 years ago, like the Canva story, check it against some outside sources too.
Yes. Always get 3 sources, even if you're using a U.S. government database, guys. That's my take on it.
So we've danced around it. There was a big story, and that's Matt Shumer's post. It was called something big is happening. And most of you have already read it. I'm not going to go through the process of it because even if you, like me, didn't care for the post, or if you did like the post, I would say that it's an opinion piece. But what is fact is that it generated a lot of conversation. Lots of people chimed in and talked about it from all sorts of aspects of life. And I think that's valuable because one of the concerns that we have had with AI is just kind of helping you understand all this different information that's coming out of it. A lot of people have vested interests. And I think that one of the articles you sent me, Stacey, that came from Ann Handley, that said something messy is happening, it said it best, and I'll just go ahead since she wrote it. It says, I'm not saying ignore AI. I'm quoting her directly. I'm not saying it won't change things. I'm not saying Matt is wrong about capabilities. I'm saying, and she writes in all caps here, do not let panic drive your decisions. So I think that's kind of the point here, is that it was a very emotional original post from Matt Shumer, and I think that's what led a lot of people to talk about it. And probably dismissing it right out of hand is more of an emotional reaction. I'll admit that was kind of mine. Yeah. But, just panicking is a little weird too. The analogy I've been kind of thinking about is like, let's say this really is as world changing as cars were or mobile phones were. No one was going around door to door going, you have to buy a mobile phone, unless they were literally trying to sell me a mobile phone. Like, you will know it's valuable because you will go to use it. So the only thing you need to worry about is what Stacey said way at the beginning of the show is what is it you were trying to achieve, and then look at all the tools available to you. Maybe don't, and I guess this is against me. Don't just automatically reject a tool out of hand because you hate it at principle, but do always consider the return on investment, all the different impacts it can have, including environmental impacts. But, when someone's trying to tell you this is the wave of the future, if you don't jump on this, you're lost, consider maybe why they're trying to tell you that. That's my thought.
Yeah, that was, I think, once you dig into who Matt is and the fact that he is actually running an AI company and he's got frameworks and models he's built off of it, and you're like, okay. And he pulled just enough facts to make it sound very factual to what he's doing, right? And and again, we know we are we are researchers and analysts who are sometimes, data can be used in a lot of different ways. Let's put it that way, right? And we're often battling our own worst sort of instincts to say, oh, but if I get that data point, it will be cool. It'll get a headline.
Yes.
Welcome to The Human Role, your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
But we also know that, look, you've got to be honest to what's happening in the market. Yeah, I read that. What I think caught me, and this is what I sent to you, Cliff, was I had a really good friend, we won't mention who I really, really respect. I think her ideas are just, and she reposted Matt's perspective on LinkedIn. And so I read it because that was the first time I'd read it, and because I had been busy all day when it was blowing up. And I was like, this is interesting. Okay. I mean, some of the information he puts out there, some stuff I hadn't seen yet. Then I had another really good friend who I really valued her opinion, thought she was amazing, thought she was smart and brilliant. She posted the other position and the one that Cliff just read off of. And I thought, oh, yes, very good points. And I thought, boy, if this is how I'm reading these, and I read this stuff every day. I mean, Cliff knows I'll be pinging him at 3 a.m. Hey, here's another article we should be paying attention to. I can't imagine how everybody else is feeling right now with all of this. It is, and what I really thought was Anne's perspective was, the choice that Matt gives us is not really a choice, right? He says either get on aggressively on AI or get left behind and die. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And maybe if I am an AI company with a small AI business model, and yes, then if you're not using AI, I think you don't have really a choice, right? But I think for everybody else, what we're seeing, and we're having this conversation, is really think about the fact that it's not just a new tool. It is a rethinking of kind of how we're going to do the work, but the same work has to be done. And so I always tell people, we went from interoffice mail to emails, and it changed the dynamics of how we got information across the world in one full swoop, right? But the whole point was still getting the communication, right? That it got faster, that it got done differently, that I could say 100 more words, that I didn't have to crank my hand up to say it, that I didn't have to photocopy a million things. All of that improved. It changed dynamically how we thought about it. And yes, and AI is actually going to add another layer, which is we got to manage the behavior of that AI. And that's going to be probably the biggest thing, which is we have to start thinking about it like we think about any other asset we have in the market, that we have to manage their background, their experience, their behavior, their products. I had this conversation today with a time management organization. I said, look, the thing about time management is we already know how to manage those resources in a way through time management that no one else understands, because there are a lot of ways that people cut corners to get things done. AI cuts corners too, right? Like, because it's got choices and it's going to go to the shortest path. We got to be able to manage that and watch that, because there's risks to that. So anyways, sorry.
No, I've been on mine, so I'm making room.
Yeah.
Out of respect for the time, got a few here. We've been doing the speed round.
Get you through it, yes.
I'd also like that you said, though, because one of the articles that you had sent me that I liked, it was called Speed Reading a Massive Criminal Investigation with AI. And this is definitely one I'm going to put in the notes, because what's interesting here is this is a researcher for a cocaine smuggling case. I think that's the first time we've used these words on this show. I don't know what. First we're talking about animation studios, and now this. Who knows what's going on? But what was interesting is because it gets into some of the practical issues that come with AI. And it's a little more into what do you do when you still want to use it, but you're worried about all these other considerations. And there's things like, redacting your files onto a local computer and then replacing sensitive info with placeholders, rather than saying this isn't something I can't use, but you can still do it, right? And things like that, giving examples of what that means. And, also he's saying, you can't use the sort of big data approach. You can't just give it everything. So he calls it, what you need is a chainsaw, not a scalpel, right? So you'd say, okay, just get the major things that you need to handle rather than trying to get just every single individual point. At that point, you're not saving money, right? So there's some practical stuff in there, and there's even some code examples that is given if you want to just put that into like
we don't know if the code's good or not. Y'all got to make that judgment.
Yeah. Just as we're not giving legal advice, we're definitely not giving coding advice. Yeah. But it reminds me of another story too, which was a legal case that came through, which was United States versus Hepner, that found that basically that if you used AI to create documents, you're acting as your own attorney and you're saying, here's a summarization of the facts. You'd say you went to, in this case, it was Claude, but it could have been any of them. And he said, here is everything that's been going on. Here's the correspondences. And you submitted that. Well, that does not fall under attorney-client privilege because an attorney was not consulted. Your AI does not count as your attorney, which sounds obvious, but I think for a lot of people that are unfamiliar and have been going to advice to their AI, it runs into things. I think that's another one where the story kind of got a little lost, where people are like, courts say that AI can't help, and that's not the case. Your attorney might do what the last story did, which is use it to summarize a whole bunch of research after all of the sort of considerations had taken place. So kind of interesting double story.
It is. Both of them are good stories. We'll link them. I know we don't have time to talk about them, but there's something that I think everyone should be paying attention to. Those are probably my two favorite this week, to be honest.
Yeah. There was another one, though, that I know I'm kind of, there's, as I've said before, the way this works is that I'll have some stories that I've seen that I like, and Stacey will have some stories that she's seen and she sees, and then we'll find out where there's overlap and where there's one that I had never seen before. And this is definitely one I had not seen before, but the more I look into it, it's pretty interesting. And the title from this was from a newsletter. It's called AI First Companies Don't Just Build Differently, They Scale Differently. And this is one where you kind of started, I think, Stacey, saying, isn't this opposite of what AI is supposed to be doing? Because they get in this whole idea of a SaaS versus an AI first company, Stacey. And I know, please get back on the soapbox on this one.
Well, and here's my thing about this is they basically did this framework and they basically said, look, here's why AI first is going to win versus SaaS, and SaaS is dying. And I said, look, I've been through this multiple levels. We've been from on-premise to cloud, from cloud to whatever's next. And, everybody's got a vision about what's changing and what's going to die. But what I will say is that the whole point of AI, if you really think about it, is it's supposed to sort of go across all these variations of ways that we use technology. It's like a human being. We as human beings go in and pick and choose how we get to things and how we get to information. And that's the whole point of it, is the flexibility. So the minute you start doing a framework and saying, oh, it can only be AI built, you're kind of discounting the fact there's so much data in all these other places. The value of AI is that it will go get the thing you need and you don't have to rebuild it because they're rebuilding it. Let me just tell you, I cannot tell you how many times I've got, we're an all-in-one system, and then you add on, and then you add on, and you add on. And we all know, we've been there. They're all Frankensteins. Every single one of them is a Frankenstein. I don't care who you are. You eventually become a Frankenstein. AI is supposed to get us out of this because you will always be looking for the next thing it's built on. So that's my soapbox on it. Let's stop worrying about whether or not it's AI built or it's built on the cloud. Let's start thinking about what it can actually do.
Yeah. And then if AI then is the one that's sort of sucking all the information out for its nourishment, would that make it a Dracula? So it's Frankenstein versus Dracula. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, future writers, you can tell we're tired. Right. There was a pretty interesting story that came out of Udacity under Accenture's role that leaders value humans over AI. It's a little bit of a attention-grabbing headline. But what was pretty interesting is, just kind of where we're at with this, because, it's almost a counterpoint to some of this, because we've talked before about how leaders, higher levels in the organization, tend to use AI more and have more of a positive view than individual contributors. And some of the numbers bear this out. This is fairly large. There was between 650 and 4,500 responses. Had to dig through the report itself. You're welcome, readers. And remember, of course, Accenture has a vested interest in AI. And one last thing is that this, when looking at demographics, it's overwhelmingly male and younger. Almost everyone was Gen X or millennials. That was, and 61% were individual contributor managers, meaning their view of AI is probably going to be not reflective of what we truly see from leadership, right? But that all being said, is 62%, for instance, said that AI could not create products and services customers will want. Over half, 53%, said customers want to work with humans. And what was pretty interesting is that when they asked it, there's a whole bunch of stats, so I recommend checking it out. But an ideal workforce mix would be 65% internal employees, 20% AI agents, and then the rest contingent labor contractors. But just last year, this same group said that they thought it would be only 8% AI agents. More than doubled in the amount of AI agents they believe would be useful. So on one hand, they're saying, yeah, it's not useful. But on the other hand, they're still saying they do believe that that would be a more ideal mix. Again, it may not be replacement, it may be enhancement, but they're starting to realize it won't work for innovation, but might work for some other things.
Yeah, I think it's always good to just keep getting a pulse check on what people think, where they're at. And I think that's very much what this is. I do think any survey, I love that you went in and got the demographics clip. That is just, you know me, it's at the center of my heart, because the minute you know that, oh, there's not a lot of females in this picture, maybe you aren't right. There's a whole other dialogue we're missing there, but okay. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Because we do know, as we've talked about on the show, women are more likely to be adversely impacted by AI than men. So always good. You know, we said you might as well just have one of those like buttons right here, like a soundboard that says, you know, always check your sources.
Always check sources. All right. Yeah. Well, Cliff, we need to get you out of here because you got to go get going.
I know, I got to get fit, but let's talk about checking you can check your sources directly by meeting us in person. Bad segue, but we're going to be in a few different places. We're both going to be March 9th through 11th in Scottsdale. You can reach out to us if you're around here.
Market Makers event. And then Tammy will be in Qualtrics at Seattle, Washington. And then I won't be at Unleashed, nor you, but we will have Allison and Summer, who are brand new, getting their legs on being an analyst and in the rooms team duo going out to Unleash.
That will both be March 16th through the 20th.
Yep, exactly. March 16th to 20th. And then I'll be here in my hometown in Raleigh, North Carolina, supporting a 321 Coffees Conference Day, which is we sponsor that. It's an amazing event. You should definitely come if you are local. Please let me know if you want a ticket for that. So, and then Cliff, I will be at Transform March 23rd through 25th going with myself. And now it looks like Summer's going to be joining me and not Terry, but that'll be in Las Vegas. And we'll be doing 2 major presentations that week, including an amazing panel and an event for a lunch and learn with our good friends at Clearco. So if you hear about that, let us know if you want to join us. And then I will be in Atlanta at the Infor event, April 13th through the 16th. At their analyst events. And then what you're going to be in Orlando?
Around the same time, 13th to 15th, I'll be at ADP's Meeting of the Minds. It's always super interesting in Orlando. And then I leave from there to go out to LA for Canva Create. As I mentioned before, that'll be April 15th to 16th in LA. Right after that, both of us will I don't know if we'll cross because you're getting as far away from me as you can. You're going all the way to Europe, right?
Going all the way to Europe. I'll be in Amsterdam at the HR Tech Europe conference. Myself and Summer will be there, so please join us April 20th through 24th. If you are going and will be joining, come let me know. We're going to have some fun that week. And then you're going to be in California, the Workday Innovation Session, right?
Yeah, I know you're sad to miss that one. I think Amsterdam.
For over 10 years. That'll be the first time in 10 years that I've missed it.
Wow. But yeah, Napa Valley is pretty nice to be at too. Don't get me wrong.
Good too. So what's all right.
That's where I'll be at the 21st to the 24th. Yeah. Then Stacey, you go to the Gaylord in Orlando, the 20th and 30th. So look for us there. And then I immediately fly up to the Bell Labs building in Holmdel, New Jersey for iSIMS. Yeah. Which will be super exciting. I know it sounds weird to say New Jersey is exciting, but if you don't know New Jersey, parts of it are beautiful. And the Bell Lab's certainly exciting. And then in June, I'll probably be in San Francisco again, but we'll cross that bridge when we come through.
That's right. Well, that's as far as we can get through April. All right. A lot going on. All right. Let's get you out of here. But friends, thank you for listening as always. We really do appreciate it. I just want to sort of wrap up today saying that one, the big survey is going to be coming out in a little bit, but you can still acquire our annual report. Actually, we're going to get started with a new promotion. So if you buy now, you get the new one as well. So that's something to think about. So it's going to be a buy one, get one free. Summer will be putting that out here. So be aware of that. So if you haven't been trying to kind of waiting for next year's, this way you could get this year's and get next year's. That's always a great win. Also, just a quick thank you. If you be sure to listen to our HR Huddle Be sure to sign up. See, I got to figure out where I'm at in my script now. This has been a long week. All right. Be sure to sign up for our website, for our newsletter. If you do want to make sure that you are on all these lists and you get the survey announcement and you get announcements about where we'll be at. We'll be speaking or visiting. And when you to participate in our annual survey, that is on our website. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, which Cliff, I think you're going to be taking over in a month, aren't you?
I believe so. So if you are an executive at a company, it does not have to be, a producer of HR software, right? If you are a high-level executive at your company in the HR space, reach out. We want to start, kind of varying between the tech side and the practitioner side. So please, you can reach out. You can just do Cliff at Sapient Insights, info at Sapient Insights. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that, although big shoes to fill with Terry.
I know, yeah, but she'll still be doing a podcast. She's going to focus hers a little bit more on leadership and where things are going with change management. So it gives us a little bit more time. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review where you grab your podcast, particularly with our work-defined audience over here. Stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind-the-scenes content. You can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. And Cliff, thank you as always for putting all of this together. I know we're rushing through things today, but we've got a great list of things to talk. Thank you to our production team, including Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast run by our amazing founder, Kelly, and our marketing team, Summer Alano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Caitlin Diamond, Allison. I think everybody's got their hands in getting this podcast up and running these days. So we appreciate everyone who does that. And that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to get started. The engine's running this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with just another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights and a little bit more brain power because we will not have been doing 3 deep dives.
Don't promise too much.
So, yeah. Thanks, everyone. It was good seeing you.
Bye, everyone.